It's time to crack on and review Doctor Who. We're going back to classic today. Hello and welcome back to Chat About It, Don't Shout About It with me, Rachel, the Queen of the Woke, as crowned by one of my haters.
I crown you Queen of the Woke!
Let's chat about it. Please do let me know what you think about this particular story in the comments section below and keep it friendly in the chat. To vote on the current poll, please head on over to the post page after this video is finished so that you can have your say. Thank you to everybody who's voted for today's story, which is the Demons, or the Daemons, depending on how you say it. I know they say it both ways. The Demons was written by Guy Leopold, otherwise known as Robert Slimmer, and Barry Letts. It's almost May Day, and it's almost time for the festivals that they have during that time. The BBC are making a programme about an archaeological dig that is happening. This dig is supposedly for the treasure of the Great War Chieftain, Bronze Age 800 BC. However, that's not what is buried there. It is a spaceship which belongs to the Demons from the planet Deimos. Miss Hawthorne has been warning off the dig throughout the entire beginning of the story. However, her warnings are not heeded. But the Doctor, having seen her on TV, naturally agrees with her and what she is saying. So he heads down to the Devil's End to put a stop to the dig. However, he doesn't make it in time. An explosion happens which results in him getting frozen. The Doctor and Jo end up staying in the village and they discover that the Master is behind all of this, and there is a force field that's been placed around the village to prevent people from coming in. It's a heat force. And prevent people from leaving, which presents a problem to the Brigadier because he needs to get in for the Doctor. We do find out that the Master who is behind all of this, and the reason why he is behind all of this is because he's after Azal, because he wants the power from the Daemons to control Earth. What a surprise. This is the Master we're talking about. Master doing what he does best. The Doctor uses his logic and his expertise with the assistance of Jo, Yates, Benton, and Miss Hawthorne in order to overthrow the Master and Azal the Demon. The bangs and the explosions and the rituals all culminate in Azal attempting to kill the Doctor when he refused that power of the demon. Jo then sacrifices herself, but the demon couldn't understand that power, so he ends up exploding himself in the church with his own power, and obviously the church goes kaboom as well. The Master tries to escape on Bessie, and she brings him back, and Unit takes him to the maximum security prison that we see in the Sea Devils. Now, I was trying to remember whether I'd seen this one or not, and I think I have, but I'm not too sure. I don't remember it very well. So maybe I haven't, because I think this is one that would stick in your mind. I've got to say, I don't have many negatives about this one. It's mostly positive. This story starts off really up there, and I think this makes a very good story because it stays at that level. It keeps it there. Quite a few of the Doctor Who stories that start off really, really high and really strong, they bring it down several notches and then they go back up to that level, or they stay at the lower level, which is fine. They can do that. But this one remained consistent, and it's a hit, in my opinion. One of the things that was really nice is the fact that the Doctor doesn't really do much fighting in this one. The biggest niggle for me about the John Pertwee Doctor, and I've said it before, so I'll say it again, is all the fighting. By the way, I've had a cold, okay, just bear with me. I personally didn't think it was needed, but this was his own spin on his particular Doctor, which is fine. I just don't like it all that much. I like the fact that they decided for the writing to divvy out the fight sequences mostly to Sergeant Benton and Captain Yates. They looked like they were enjoying all their action. That's not to say that the Doctor didn't get any action. He had a really cool stunt where he gets shot at by the pub landlord, but he ends up falling off his motorbike that he was riding. He also gets captured by the Morris dancers. Now, I probably find this a bit amusing. He didn't fight them off. In fact, he allowed himself to be captured. Well, no. Naughty Rachel. He didn't allow himself to be captured. Okay, he was ambushed. There were more of him, more of them than of him. But They tied him to the maypole. They were going to burn him at the maypole as if he were a witch. Now, one of the things that I really do like about this story is that the fact that they play into witchcraft and the fact that there's supernatural things that are going on, but also they remind us that there is a scientific explanation for absolutely everything. We had cats, toads, a pub, rain, graveyards, owls, death, bangs, puffs of smoke. There was everything that was going on that made this such a good story. It was like what 73 yards could have been, but never was. I like the idea that they're going to try and make something happening around Beltane and that they were looking at occults and the Sabbath. If there were ever a woman who was not interested in Doctor Who, this might actually interest said woman. Not only that, we have a witch, a white witch in it, Miss Hawthorne. She appears to be controlling the wind, which in itself is a pretty cool effect, I would say. The policeman also becomes possessed and he moves to smash her across the head, but because the wind subsided, he was no longer possessed. There was more of a danger moment, and I thought she was going to get done in, but she didn't. I think that Miss Hawthorne being the temporary companion in some respects, okay, not all, made an interesting contrast to the John Pertwee doctor. She is very smart. She knows what she's talking about, and she gets a good sense of the world and how it responds to people. She's very well cast too, and very well played. She could easily make a companion to the doctor, not that Jo is bad. By the way, I'm just saying that I've noticed that she could have made a good companion. She has the intelligence to do it, and she brought the questions much like Jo does as well. One of my favourite bits is when she calls the master a blockhead. That came out of the blue. But I think that the master deserved it in this case. She called him a blockhead. There could have been much worse things that she could have called him. She's also quite brave. She gets captured and saved by Sergeant Benton, but she wants to be out there doing all these things, and she does help save the doctor, or well, at least 90% save the doctor when he is being burned on the maypole. Now, her initiative and her plan is really what results in the doctor figuring out how he's going to escape from this situation. And she even herself has to apply a real situation to fake magic. So the scientific side behind all of it. It's almost like she grows and she comes to a realization that there is something behind what is really happening. Now, she saves him and Jo saves him, which I admit I wasn't expecting, because quite often in classic Who, it's the doctor saving everyone else. It's the other way round. But in this case, though, I don't think I mind it because Jo didn't realise she was saving him. And there was a wonderful naivety about it. But the doctor also acknowledges the fact that she did. So Azal tries to kill the doctor, but the doctor doesn't want that power. Oh, because the doctor doesn't want the power, which I'll talk about in a moment, but Jo stands in front of him and protects him. And I think that would be a normal reaction from any companion, actually. It's humane. And it's a distinct quality that we all have. We all have it in us to do something like that, I think. So I respect Jo for that. And yes, I know, I'm highly critical of when the doctor does not save the day in New Who. But in New Who, it's far more common compared to classic. John Pertwee, okay, let's go back to him. All right, so I've spoken about him briefly with the fighting, but I will give him credit here as well. The Doctor doesn't want their power, okay? And it makes sense for the Doctor not to want it. And the fact that John Pertwee played it with sheer terror was absolutely amazing, because the Doctor, in my opinion, isn't greedy, and he wouldn't want that. And funny enough, would he even be able to control it? There's a good chance that he wouldn't be able to control it. You could look at it as a way of perhaps he was deflecting it purposely so that the master would take it, but I don't think so. I don't think that was his intention whatsoever. But the delivery from John was absolutely brilliant. I think that John is at his peak in this one. I think he remains consistent throughout his entire run. By the way, I haven't seen all of the John Pertwee ones, but the ones that I have seen, he's remained consistent, okay? But here he's clear, he knows exactly what he wants to do, and he's doing it. And I also think that this is the best I've ever seen Roger Delgado. Putting the Master into all these crazy rituals is a brilliant idea to me. This is something that the Master would do. He had a lot of complicated dialogue as well, but he wasn't OTT. Not that I find Roger Delgado OTT. I tend to find that with Anthony Ainley sometimes, depending on which story he's in. But I think there was a certain reserve in this one. And I think that's important to bring to the role of the Master for this particular story, because it was of what it was about and what was happening. And there is a lot that's happening in this story. One of the best things is that they did not have the Doctor and the Master meet until part 5. So he and John probably spent next to no time together other than the rehearsal whilst they were making this particular story. So, and I think it's a good thing. It creates a different dynamic when they do things like that. The ending with Bessie and the Master is probably one of my favourite endings to a Master story. He tries to escape and he uses Bessie to do it, but obviously the Doctor has a remote control, so that's how he is able to bring the Master back so he can go to the maximum security prison, ready for the Sea Devils in the following series. Now, talk about using circle theory in order to produce what feels like a very concise, tight story. I will give the two writers praise for that. That's not easy to do in a script, let alone a book. They keep it consistent. Everything that is happening with Bessie was the key to capturing the Master from the beginning right through to the end. But how they were doing it, well, of course, because everything is about trickery in this one. They went down the route of making Bessie appear to be a trick. They started at the beginning and they carry it right through. Now, I kind of laugh with this one because of Bessie. She's an old car, right? But it makes me think of the children's TV show when this happens. Brum? So if you don't know what Brum is, Brum was a children's UK TV show, and it was about a little car, kind of similar to the Bessie car, that had a mind of its own, and it would come to life, and it would go off on its own adventures. It was really cool, okay? All right? It was awesome. Now, obviously, Bessie is not based on Brum, but she was their plot device. Her developing the so-called personality and the Doctor being able to control her via a remote control enabled them to get over some plot points that perhaps would ordinarily involve the sonic screwdriver. In fact, I don't recall the sonic screwdriver being used in this story. At least I didn't count it at all being used. I didn't see it unless I fell asleep. Maybe I did. I don't know. I've got a couple of negatives. First one is more of a question, though. Could they have had some more gargoyles running about in it? What do you think? Could it? I don't know. Please put it in the comment section below. I'm undecided on that one. Maybe it would have benefited from more gargoyles. Gargoyles. Maybe it wouldn't have. I'm not sure. In part 4, and this could be the fact that this is an old recording, okay? I will hands up acknowledge that, but the demon is a tad loud. And yeah, like I say, it's just because it's an old footage, most likely, because I don't find it in part 5. Another negative I have is Katie Manning lying down in what looks like to be real ivy. And now, it could have been fake, but to me it looked real. That wouldn't be allowed nowadays. But if it was real, that's kind of dangerous. And I think there's a bit of a plot hole as well. Just a small one, because the story is pretty concise, but there is a character that dies at the beginning, and Miss Hawthorne states that he died of fright because he had the look of fright on his face. And in that case, that was it. That was never addressed again. And I'm wondering, why wasn't it addressed? It could be that it was just that the fact that I don't know. It was a tiny plot point, and I'm not too bothered by it, but it did occur to me that it was never really addressed, unless it was Azal. It might have been because it was Azal. I just thought everybody else was disappearing, but he dies of fright. What's the difference? What's the difference? Now, how meta can you get with classic Who? I know that John Nathan Turner might have broached the meta stuff with his way of doing things in the Sylvester McCoy era, but this admittedly just falls into the meta camp in part 1 and part 2. So Doctor Who is doing a TV show within a TV show, and they made it better than RTD or Juno Dawson could ever do. Now, in Juno's case, okay, it's obviously integrated well. Okay, the TV show is integrated into the TV show. It's debatable as to whether it's a good story. But this one, I think, is a lot better. And why it's better is because they made it an extremely integral part of the story. But they didn't have a real TV presenter, okay? As far as I'm aware, anyway, it was an actor that was playing a TV presenter. Now, don't get me wrong, I love Rylan, but it still should have been a TV presenter that was an actor, okay? Does that make sense? In fact, using the meta TV presenters happens throughout the entirety of the RTD era, New Who. Like, they have to have actual TV presenters, and I think when you do that, the kinds of runs a risk of dating it a little bit. So, how they did it was a nice little touch, and it was completely made up character. Alistair Ferguson makes me think of Alex Ferguson. I don't know why, and I'm not into football. With the show, The Passing Parade. As far as I'm aware, that has nothing to do with TV overall, other than that it was just a character and a TV show in a story. I would say that they put a lot of thought into this particular story. Like I said, it started the way that it started and it kept itself at that level. There are truly some fantastic executions of pyrotechnics. We see explosions going off left, right, and center. We see them testing the heat barrier, which I really like, and they find lots of different ways of doing that. And then we've also got pyrotechnics with the gargoyle Bok when he shoots the humans. And I think that the video quality for the time is pretty good as well. They must have cleaned it up a fair bit. They focus on making the effects look like magic, but obviously we know there's a scientific explanation for everything in this because the doctor says so. They use the effectiveness of the smoke mirrors, the explosions, the pyrotechnics, everything that they did. And they use that to the extent of making it look as dark and as occult and as black magic as they possibly could. It fits in with pagan festivals, but not to the point where I think it makes a mockery of it, not like what happens in Newer Who. It shows that Beltane is still celebrated, but the Master has taken advantage of these pagan festivals and rituals, which obviously is perfectly well within the rights of the character to do so, and he's using it as a cover for what he really wants to do. And he's relying on the fact that humans believe in magic. So the Master, in effect, is making a mockery of it, but the Doctor doesn't. He uses his knowledge of it to use the iron on Bok whilst chanting something completely random. He made it look like he was doing magic so that Bok would run off and don't attack the Doctor and Joe in the end. I like how this is all tied in with history as well, without it being a history piece, with its elements of horror, and it does do a good amount of action as well. The helicopter chase with Joe and the Doctor and Bessie towards the heat barrier is brilliant, and the helicopter exploding, I must admit, I wasn't expecting that. Joe being thrown out across the grass from the car and ended up being knocked out is a good way of separating a companion from the Doctor. I think I'm very impressed with a lot of things about this particular story. The location for this story also adds to it. It's an idyllic type of setting. I think it's a certain well, you go to these villages and they have folk legends that you associate with them, these creepy stories, and quite often associated with villages and pubs. And of course, that's all tied in with the main centre being the focus of the church, and the church and the effects inside the church whenever they're doing the effects of the Sabbath ritual. It's just fabulous. It's just fabulous. The staging, the different levels in the staging, the cinematography that was going on throughout all of this. I would like to say it's an exceptionally well directed piece of work. Doctor Who, it's a funny thing, isn't it? Well, the show itself is not funny. I take it very seriously, but what's funny about it is you have all these episodes that are absolutely amazing, and then you go along and you plod along and everything's okay, and then you get a standout piece. And I think that this one is definitely one of those for John Pertwee. It has science fiction as well, and it takes everything that has to do with occult, black magic, white magic, and all of that, and just amalgamates it into this one thing. And it's a very tight piece, very seamless in many respects, and it ends very quaintly. They finish with the fertility dance around the maypole, and I really like that. You get a nice shot of the village, and the village keeping up its traditions. Makes me think of Midsummer Murders, even though I know Midsummer Murders was way after Doctor Who's time. Now, the Daemons, or the demons, as how they are referred to twice in the story, the Master has established a link between himself and the demon Azal. This is why this is where the sci-fi comes in. It's a unique blend. I like the idea that these demons can't be seen, but then they go in to make a change and in an event, and they become large. And I like that it leads to a very awesome shot from the helicopter with the giant hoof marks in the grass. Now, I don't watch any of the behind the scenes stuff, mostly because I don't want it spoiled, but this one, I quite often wonder how they did that. Was it a scaled shot? Was it a real one? Who knows? I don't need the answer really, but I do wonder. The effects of this demon consistently throughout, when it turns big, it's brilliant. You know the severity because the camera is shaking and they're falling over, and you know that this creature that is being summoned is coming out. He's big and he's dangerous. The reveal of the demon and the mask is quite creepy. It's definitely a horned devil mask. It looks like it's based off the Oni type masks, devil type masks from Japan, and that's very difficult effects to achieve for what they did with him. And they pretty much kept him under wraps for the entire story. But then we get a shot of his massive legs, and that's at the beginning of part 4. And it's like, whoa, this is big. This is what caused the Master in that cliffhanger. You see what I did there? To fall over in part 3. And he telling him to stay back or it would destroy him. First time you ever really get to see the Master in like real true fear. Well, I say the first time. We do get it with the other stories, but this one, it ended on a cliffhanger. The Master got a cliffhanger. Goodness me. He must have been terrified. And the other cliffhangers were fantastic as well. The face reveal of the demon was brilliant. The gargoyle entering the dig as well. But I think my favourite cliffhanger is part 1's cliffhanger, where the Doctor is in the dig and everything just goes absolutely chaotic because of what the Master had been doing. He gets covered in what appears to be a lot of debris. It's a bit dimpsy in that, sorry, a bit dark. Okay. Southern roots came out there. And so it was a bit difficult to see what exactly it was. So it looked to me like it was debris. Okay. Now the professor dies, and they're trying to figure out what has happened to the doctor. And there was a big question in part 2 as to whether or not the doctor was dead, because he looks like he's a block of ice. He's frozen like that. And it's not until about 15 minutes in when the demon comes out and he is able to wake up because the heat from it all thaws him out. But I love the fact that they left us hanging. I love those types of cliffhangers like that. It 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 just it makes you wonder what on earth is going to happen. You know, everything else is going on, but this cliffhanger is still hanging in the air. You're like, no, no, can I know? Can I know what's going to he's going to come back? Also, bring back awesome reveals. The gargoyle appearing over that hill in part 2. Brilliant. Okay. The first official sighting of the gargoyle moving, but then the master also appearing to bring it to life, and its red eyes and it's shaking its head like that. Absolutely brilliant. It's truly fantastic. The gargoyle destroying the humans on screen, and the fact that the effects look very clean and the color separation overlay didn't, in my opinion, appear to be very apparent. One of my favourite bits is when Sergeant Benton blows up the gargoyle as well in part 5, but then it reforms. Like how? Maybe it was just rewinding of the footage. Who knows? But it's a fantastic piece of footage. Fantastic and brilliant seem to be the operative words of this particular review. What I also find interesting about this as well, and I mentioned this earlier, is the master and the doctor not really meeting until part 5. Well, in this, the doctor and the brigadier don't really see each other until part 4. So again, they're kept very separate. And in this one, it does work because sometimes they can be right old at loggerheads, can't they? Because the brig, he wants to go in hammer and tongs with all of it, with the fighting and all that. But the doctor doesn't want that. Well, fighting guns and stuff. Instead, they added a unique aspect of to sort of keep them separate with the heat barrier and the doctor trying to figure out how to get them in. The brigadier wasn't really surplus to any requirements in this case. He was still there to do his job. I think he was there really to keep communications open, because obviously he's a companion as well. So keep asking the questions and things like that and query what was going on with the doctor. And of course, Nicholas Courtney has got a lot of on-screen charisma, so it's good to have him in it. In fact, that was one of the things that I liked. And he worked really well. And he worked with nearly every single doctor on screen, but never Colin Baker, unfortunately. Or Paul McGann. But he did do the audios with them in the end. So at least we got that before we lost him. But all in all, this is just a very good, consistent story. And I find it very intriguing. And it lies into the quintessential village horror folklore type of story. And it ties in sci-fi, pagan festivals, the history of pagan festivals, horror, thunder, lightning, action. It's got all of it. It's got a bit of everything. And then it finishes on a very sweet note. Dare I say that this is up there with my favourites of Pertwee. Absolutely. Well, anyway, that is what I think. Now, it's time to find out what you said when I asked you about it. Paul, said, Paul 1971 said, thought it was a tad overrated after all the hype once finally seeing it. Plus, it almost feels like it's missing the final episode. Okay, so here's the thing, all right? This is the issue that I have about things that get highly rated, all right, and spoken about. I find that the more people bang on about it, the and this is something that happened with Wicked, the stage version, not the film version, and they'd go and hype it up. I go in with a higher expectation than what I really should have, should I have chosen to see it, and then I end up disappointed. So I understand where Paul is coming from, but personally, for me, with this one, I hadn't heard any of the hype. So when I watched it, I didn't have those expectations of what to expect about this story. And I quite often also do not read the comments section, because you notice I heart it much later, until after I've written the main part of the script, because I find it interesting to see who agrees with me and who disagrees with me. So yes, that's an important thing to note. Now, one thing I will say about the Jon Pertwee era is that sometimes the stories are too long. Now, I don't sit down and watch classic Who in one big fail swoop, like hardly ever. I maybe watch it over a couple of days, 2 parts here, 2 parts there. But I don't feel like with this one it was missing an episode. I think 5 was enough for it. I think it kept it tight and concise, but if you are used to the Jon Pertwee stories being around 6 or 7 parts, then I do understand why you would feel that. For me personally, I don't mind it being 5 parts. Now, Paul Roach says, iconic. Pertwee is the Doctor. Oh, sorry. Pertwee is the Doctor. Jo is the companion. And the Master is the best villain. A story where everything clicks and is a lot of fans' go-to story. I dare you to say anything bad about this classic. I think I already did. But not many. They were very minor indeed. Now, Pertwee is not my Doctor. We all know that by now. But he is definitely on tip-top form. And I think this is one of Delgado's best performances as the Master. And Katie is, of course, charming as ever. Now, Glenn Collins says, my first exposure to Doctor Who. Oh, goodness. I was 5 and it scared the hell out of me, so much so that I skipped the rest of Pertwee's era and only plucked up the courage to watch again once Tom had taken over, by which time it was even scarier. Now, I could see why this one would terrify you. Doctor Who thrills me more than terrifies me personally, but I will say when it taps into the more everyday aspects, which we did get a lot of in the Jon Pertwee era, that's when you're more likely to, in my opinion, roll me up, I would say. Which is what you want from Doctor Who, really. This classic story is everything that a lot of people want from the show and still want from the show to this day. It's a prime example that I think creators could learn from, the new ones. Yeah. Well, anyway, that's what I think. Please do let me know what you think. Check out some of the other content that I've picked out for you. Chat about it, don't shout about it. I am sorry that this one was late. Thanks for watching. Bye-bye. Thank you for watching today. Don't forget you can join me on my other platforms as well. I've got YouTube, Rumble, Spotify, X, TikTok, Instagram, Locals, Substack, and I also have a Discord. Everything is linked below.